All right, good morning. My name is Sanjay Goel. I'm a professor in the School of Business at the State University of New York, and I'm also the director of the Forensics Analytics and Technology Center at the university. I started my career as a hacker, and that was 20 years ago. That's how I learned all the tools of the trade, but now I'm a full professor at the university and run my own lab. I have a $5 million grant portfolio from various agencies. I'm doing all kinds of stuff from intelligence work all the way to behavioral security and other things. So, one of the things I also do is I co-organize the New York State Cybersecurity Conference, which started like this about 20 years ago with about 200 people, and today it has about 1,200 people attending. How many of you have been to the New York State Cybersecurity Conference? Okay. So I'm going to use my same remarks again. So I'm just kidding. So like I said, I started working in this field about 20 years ago. And I have seen a lot of tectonic shifts. When I get very close to this, it buzzes in my ear, so I'm going to stick on this side. I've seen a lot of tectonic shifts and a lot of how technology has evolved. So what I want to do today is give you a glimpse of how the technology has evolved and how the field of security has evolved along with the rest of the technology. And finally, I see a lot of young faces here. I want to provide some advice on where the field is moving in terms of employment, what is required in the future, and where people need to train and retrain themselves. There's a huge potential, but what I've found is a lot of people are missing the target and learning the wrong kinds of things, which means they spend a lot of time learning, but in the end, they don't really benefit from a lot of the education that they're getting. And we'll give you a perspective of how we are changing all of that at the University of Albany and refocusing our cyber education across multiple colleges. So, if you look at the last 10 years, we have lost over several $1 billion, over 4,000 data breaches, which have basically covered all kinds of industry. And so every day we get this news, well, data has been breached, and one company versus another company, so people are almost getting immune to all of these data breaches. But what is also happening is that we are keeping a focus on small data breaches, personal information lost, credit card information lost, health information records stolen. But the field of security has moved on. They are much more important and dangerous problems that we need to contend with, but we keep focusing on the little problems that we've had in the past. So my job here is to expose you to a broader view, to a long view of what security is today and where it's going to go in the future. Okay. There are demographic shifts that are happening around the world, which are impacting our cyber world and cybersecurity. There are technological shifts that are happening that are going to impact. And there are a lot of new challenges from new actors and players. So one thing we need to be very clear, that cyber is not a choice. We need to have cyber. The technology has moved on. We all depend on cyber, so we just can't shut it off. It is not shuttable anymore. We depend on it. A lot of systems depend on it. So the only choice we have is to make it secure. And that's where the challenge is. And the targets evolved, the adversaries have evolved, and the situation is changing continuously. If you look at what happened in the early 2000s, right? Well, 2009, 10, 11, there were a lot of denial of service attacks. Well, there were attacks on Amazon.com, CNN, Twitter, Australian Parliament, US oil firms. What happened? A lot of information was stolen. Well, people got over it, people got used to it, right? Then we had the Sony hack, right? Then we have the DNC hack. Then we had the Operation Cleaver. So if you look at how the attacks are evolving, you will see how technology is evolving with them. So one of the biggest evolution that you have seen over the last 20 years, which is enabling a lot of the technology, is what? The bandwidth. Everything that we are doing today, the cloud, everything else, people had conceived that when the internet was first created. What's happening today is a lot of the things that we had imagined about 20, 25 years ago are possible because of the increased processing, because of the increased bandwidth, and that's why a lot of this is happening. So most people think these are new innovations that we're coming up with. These have been innovated a long time back. We are just able to accomplish them now. That's why we have this technology today. And so let's take a look at the current state of cybersecurity, right? So what have we done? Over the last 20 years, we have tried to create an impregnable security around our perimeter, right? We have firewalls, we have DMZs, we have intrusion detection system so that nobody enters. Tell you what, it's completely failed. Why did it fail? Because of the human. There's a human factor in there which the hackers can exploit through phishing-based messages, through basically stealing credentials and whatnot, which completely bypasses this. So the security paradigm that we had created over the last 20 years, that's something we still rely on. It's not functional anymore. And I will demonstrate to you why and how. Second, the networks are getting more complex and dense. We keep adding new nodes, we keep creating new networks. So what's happened is over time, the networks are so complex and dense, we have lost complete visibility into our own networks. We don't know who's coming in, we don't know who's leaving, we don't know what data is being stolen, we don't know how it is being stolen. So that's the second challenge we have today, is to gain visibility back into our networks. When the internet was first conceived, the network was simple, straightforward, easy to understand, but the complexity keeps growing up. The third, the actors and motivations have changed, right? When we first started the internet, who used to hack? People like me. People used to enjoy this. People who are basically the first generation of the hackers, like Robert Morris, who created the internet worm. But they have changed. They have become financial syndicates, nation states. Each country has an army of hackers now, which is running for the government. And finally, we always keep worrying about the external hackers, but insider threats are even bigger than the external threats today. So insider attacks are a key challenge. So you already know about all of the earlier worms that came out, the internet worm, the I love you virus, and so on and so forth, the Anna Kournikova virus. But let's look at what happened starting end of 2009. The first was the Operation Aurora. What happened in that? It was a targeted malware attack against 30 major US companies, including Google and Adobe, which exploited a zero-day flaw in Internet Explorer. Why did they do that? It's basically they wanted to have source code information from a lot of different US software companies which were doing really well. And China was blamed for ordering the attack, in part to bolster its ability to monitor dissidents. Their goal was to be a lot of their dissidents were working in these firms, and that's why this was launched. But look at it this way. It lasted 2 months, December 2009 to January 2010, before it was discovered. Let's look at the next attack, right? Again from China. With cybersecurity firm Mandiant wrote the report in February 2013 entitled APT1, exposing one of China's cyber espionage unit. They detail the actions of the unit, and the attack involved 141 companies, 20 major industries over 8 years from 2006 to 2014. The companies included critical industry, and they basically stole secrets from all over the place, from Westinghouse, from nuclear plants, to everything that they could get hand on. So what was the purpose of this attack? This was about industrial espionage to take trade secrets. The first one was about monitoring dissidents. This was about trade secrets. Let's move forward. 2014-15, the OPM hack. How many people remember that? So 21.5 million records were stolen from people who had security clearances through this attack. They were not only current and former government employees, but also some people who were in the intelligence. The hack compromised personal information, social security number, date of birth, addresses, and detailed security clearance background information. Okay? So how did this attack happen? This attack happened was they exploited somebody's credentials to get into the first level, and then they moved laterally across, finding opportunities. And as they moved laterally across, they found other targets, until they were able to get to the real treasure trove of information. So what do you see in all of this? That over time, the attacks are taking longer and longer and longer, right? 2 months, several years, another several years. So these are the persistent attacks. So we have moved away from the internet worms, where the attacks were done just for the purpose of testing out technology, to real sinister attacks when people are doing this for actual financial gain, corporate espionage, government espionage, and political purposes. And finally, in 2015 and 16, what happened? What was the major attack, which we're still talking about today? The DNC hacks. The Democratic National Committee's server were taken away. So the John Podesta was hacked. At least 60,000 emails were stolen and published by WikiLeaks. And some people blame that was the reason why one of the candidates lost. I mean, I'm not blaming either side of it, but again, this was a political attack. So along with that, we look at what happened with Snowden and Chelsea Manning, right? They were insiders. Similar threat. They basically worked over months and months and months, collecting information, stealing data, and transmitting it out. So the attacks have gone away from singular incidents. They have become more and more and more persistent. So that's where the future is. So if you look at all of these things, it basically is a clear multi-step process. It starts with a reconnaissance, where basically a hacker group takes a target. Instead of finding a random target, they figure a target out. They recon the target for months and months and months, test their tools out until they find some vulnerabilities. Once they've discovered a vulnerability, they basically take the first level of penetration. They basically take somebody's user credentials, use somebody's phishing email, and it can take months before they gain the initial entry, right? Once they go in, they basically look for other weaknesses, they escalate their privileges. And once they escalate the privileges, then they move laterally across the whole enterprise network until they're able to find the information that they're looking for. That's when the real data exfiltration starts. So all of them are using the same technology process today. So like I said before, organizations have traditionally focused on perimeter to protect their networks. So what does all this say? That no matter how strong a perimeter is, people are going to break in. So what's the solution to this? Right, we need to have some kind of monitoring system. The fundamental thing is we need to move from the perimeter to the core. Most of the people who are trained in security are trained to deal with perimeter security, right? Where the real need for security comes at the core of the network, internal to the network. That's where we need visibility into the network, right? So people can spend hours and hours and hours working on recon, days and days, months and months before they're able to gain entry, right? So you need to be able to detect these attacks as soon as possible and repulse them. You cannot prevent intrusion. It's going to happen. So the paradigm has shifted that we need to expect intrusions to happen. The question is, how can we detect them, how quickly we can detect them, and how quickly we can contain the damage. So what happens in the 2000s, right? Business process reengineering. We basically spend billions of dollars reengineering our processes to integrate all of our systems. Tell you what, that's the biggest security weakness in all organizations. Once they get initial entry, bam, the whole system is under their control. So what we need to do is, we need to start thinking of alternate architectures that we used to have before, where we had siloed systems. So we need to fundamentally start thinking about security in a different way. That we can't rely on the perimeter security. We need to have siloed systems. We need to have visibility into the networks, and we need to improve our detection capability. How do we detect? Just log every information that you can get, right? Extract the useful information, put it on a common timeline, and connect the dots together. That's the current security, and that's where we need to train people on. So gone are the days where you can say, well, I can install a firewall, I can understand what an IDS system works for, and I can set a network together. Tell you what, it's very easy to set these things up. There are manuals available. Anybody can set these up. If you want to call yourself a security professional, you need to go a level deeper. You need to be able to go into the security analytics business, right? So where are most of the people involved today? Most people are involved in basically patching the systems, right? What's happening? The vendors discover patches, they send the patches, and that's a big day. It's a Microsoft patch day. So the whole organization is involved in that. We need more than just patching the systems. We need to be able to understand what's going on in deep internal to the systems. So we need to gain visibility into the networks, log everything, and then connect the dots. Who's entering the system, what data is coming from, what data is leaving. Look for anomalies. You need to be detectives into your own systems, right? The new security is not setting up a firewall, but security analytics and forensics. That's where the future is going to be. That you need to train yourself technically, that's what you need to train on. So if you look at the security today, it's a data analytics field. It is no longer a computing field. You need to be able to be strong in data analytics to be able to do good security. And once you have that security, I'm not saying we don't need perimeter security. You need to still have locks on the doors, but we need to have a lot more visibility into our own networks. So given that the security paradigm has changed, I'm going to take a long view of some of the other technological changes. And the first thing you need to know is, like as also mentioned earlier, that the bandwidth constantly keeps increasing. What is the increasing bandwidth doing? It's enabling a lot of technologies which we never thought were possible. Okay? So let's take a look back. If you look at the 80s were the decade of the personal computer, when computing moved from large data centers and whatnot to everybody's personal computer desktop, right? The 90s were the internet revolution that created networks for universal connectivity through information exchange, communication, email, and whatnot. That grew. The 2000s were the era of social networking. The Facebooks, the MySpaces, LinkedIn, and whatnot, they all emerged. And now, right now, they're all institutionalized. Everybody uses them. So what's this current decade doing? So each decade has seen a different technological revolution. What do we have in this decade? Anybody? Internet of Things. So what is Internet of Things, right? We all tend to use these large acronyms and buzzwords. So what is Internet of Things? Internet of Things is powered by two things: sensors and communication. So this is the decade of sensors and communication, the ability to communicate from anywhere, everywhere, the ability to have miniaturized sensors. Today we have billions of sensors everywhere. If you look at a modern car, the modern car has a more complex network and more sensors than the F-35 fighter, and that was supposed to be the most complex machine, right? So this is the current revolution. So what are the implications of that? So what's happening is that from pure cyber systems, we are moving over to cyber physical systems. So not only are we connecting things together, we are actually connecting things that move, things that have motion, things that are able to operate. So that completely changes the paradigm. So if you look at what has happened today, nobody has died of an internet attack, or ostensibly not many people may have died, right? But with the cyber physical systems, the game changes completely, right? If you look at the three major innovations in cyber physical systems, what are the three major innovations? The smart grid, which is universal connectivity of the electrical grid. Second thing is connected vehicles, which will give you self-driving cars, collision avoidance systems. How is all that happening? Because of sensors and communication. Today, if you buy a Toyota, it basically has a collision avoidance system. If you get too close to a car, it will cut your speed down, right? If you change one lane to another lane, by accident you're drifting in lanes, it will beep at you and try to correct it back. Where is all this coming from? It's basically sensors. So we have all kinds of sensors. We have sensors which are visual sensors. We have sonars. We have every kind of sensor which is coming into vehicles, which is changing the way we are going to have our cars designed. Most people think that basically having self-driving cars is a pipe dream. It is not a pipe dream. Most people thought there's going to be at least 50 years before they come. That's not true. Within 5 years, you will see a lot of self-driving cars on the roads. And it just depends on the infrastructure. So what happens when that happens? Right? The stakes are going to be much higher. It's not only going to be about loss of information, it's going to be about loss of life, right? If somebody were to break into a car and take a collision avoidance system and reverse the algorithm, what happens? It basically accelerates a car into another car and causes accidents, right? Take a simple example. How many of you use Easy Pass in the morning? Right? If somebody were to break into the Easy Pass system and basically completely block it, what will happen? The highways will get choked. So we are so dependent on technology, on cyber physical systems, that we don't realize the kind of dangers that we face in security. And the third thing which the sensors and communication are going to do is what? We talked about the smart grid, which will contain basically the largest monolithic network, complete cyber physical systems, and every household, every power generation equipment will be connected to each other. That'll be a single cyber physical system, right? When we talk about connected vehicles, we are basically creating millions and millions of ad hoc networks which are constantly being created, dispersed, created as the vehicles move on. So if a car moves on, it is constantly joining a different ad hoc network at a different time. So what's the third major revolution that we will see in technology? Yes, the third one is human implantable devices. People will have artificial eyes. They already have pacemakers which are controlled externally. There are insulin pumps. So this technology, where we are able to control medical devices which are implanted in human bodies remotely outside, that's going to be the next medical revolution that is coming in. So what are the implications of that? Somebody has artificial eyes, right? They're driving a car. What if somebody hacks into their eyes and blinds them while they're in the middle of driving, right? If somebody is going through an airport check-in line, you give them a jolt of electricity to their pacemaker, which instantly basically causes their death. So the exploits that can happen in the cyber physical systems, which are human implantable systems, are just phenomenally dangerous that are going to happen. So what I'm trying to explain here is that the paradigm is going to shift in security. So we do not need to be rooted into our old concern that, well, we just need to make sure that our perimeter is secure. The security challenges are much broader and they are much more important. So as young men and women, when you think of security, don't think of security just as a network security. You need to expand your horizons. You need to combine security with other fields. You need to start looking at a specific domain. So security is no longer a generic field. Security is becoming specialized fields in different areas. If you were to specialize in cyber physical systems and security today, that will be the hottest growth area in 2-3 years. So look at technology trends. Don't get rooted with current problems. The current problems will get solved. You need to start thinking towards the future. That's what my recommendation is. So let's take another concept of privacy, right? We all want our privacy, right? Everybody thinks that they should be private, the government should not intrude their information, nobody should be able to get their information. Tell you what, you have an accident, right? You're lying on your deathbed. Would you want your privacy to hold up the medical information that can be released to help you treat and whatnot? Or do you stop caring about privacy then? So we need to stop thinking about privacy as an absolute concept. Privacy needs to become a utilitarian concept, whereby we think of privacy, it's very important to us, we want to preserve it, but there are times when utility becomes more important than privacy, right? What happens during the time of war? Privacy always goes down, security always comes first, right? What happens when 9/11 happened? Our privacy went down, security went up. So when you start looking at the cyber physical systems, do we need to make it completely anonymous? Right? Or should we make them traceable? So there are some fundamental issues that we need to address as we are moving into the next realm of technology and technology systems. That look, we need to reconsider the concepts of privacy. We need to rethink through where the technology is going to moving. We need to rethink the technology that we're going to adapt. So the common thing that everybody always talks about is, well, we need to start thinking about security before we design systems. Tell you what, that's never going to happen. Because humans are innovators, they are going to find the next innovation that challenges them, how they can improve technology. And security is always going to lag behind. So we cannot change the fundamental mindset. So we need to make sure that security as a concept needs to be considered as something as an afterthought. We can think about security, but there'll be a lot of challenges which we will never be able to address before we build systems. So yes, should we think about security ahead of time? Ideally, yes. Should we think of security during the design? Yes. But in the end, we need to reconcile to the fact that a lot of security will be designed after the systems have already been designed. So let's plan for that. And let's rethink our dogmatic beliefs about security. So let's take another example, right? What is made possible by, dogmatic beliefs about privacy. That's what we need to change. So let's think about another major evolution that is happening now. Cloud, right? How many people are familiar with the cloud? Right. How many people think that cloud is the latest and the greatest thing since sliced bread? Right? So most people think that the cloud is the latest and greatest innovation without really understanding what the implications of the cloud are. What is a cloud? Cloud is basically you're working on a desktop and remotely accessing data, maybe computation power, right? And most people think that that's going to solve all of their problems. They don't have to maintain networks anymore, right? They don't have to basically provision for more space. You can easily get more space. All those things are true, right? But what are the challenges that people are not thinking? It's the security challenges. Let's say you have 20 terabytes of data that you put on the cloud. What if the cloud vendor goes down? You have no backup. You have nothing with you. How long will it take for you to go through the legal hazard of fighting a bankrupt company, taking your data and moving to another cloud? So is that innovation? Yes, it's an innovation, but are there risks? People are not considering the risks. Let's take another example, right? Cloud. A lot of cloud companies have their servers outside the United States. So let's say your data is outside the United States. In case of a legal litigation, which country's laws are applicable to your data? Is it the United States? Is it the other country? Both countries? No country? We don't know the answers to that, right? And third, a lot of people thinking as cloud as a cheap alternative, right? But it's not always cheap alternative. You get an initial low price and then they jack up the price. Economically, once you decide to have a cloud outsourcing service, what happens internally? You lose the expertise, you don't know how to maintain your own internal networks, your internal data servers, and suddenly you basically become dependent on somebody else. So I'm not saying cloud is bad, but all the new technologies that you're thinking through, they need to be carefully considered. So cloud is not a technological innovation. It is basically something which you already imagined. It's basically an outsourcing decision, and that's how it should be considered. So a lot of the mistakes people are making is basically because of lack of fundamental and true knowledge. And that's where you need to really think clearly about where technology lies and not get overawed by the hype in the technology. So having talked about what's happening at a lower level, let's take a look at some of the global shifts that are happening. Right? The first shift that's happening is the demographic shift, right? The internet was invented in the US. It was adopted by the West. And that's where about 80% penetration is. So where is the fastest growth of the internet? Africa, Asia, right? China, India, where the population centers are. So if you look at some of the recent incidents that happened internationally, the war in Georgia, the war in Estonia, what happened in that case? That common citizens of the country, they basically were involved in launching attacks against the enemy countries. For instance, Russian hackers, Russian citizens were attacking basically servers in Georgia and Estonia. What are the implications of that? Does each citizen of a country become a combatant? Should there be retaliatory attacks against every citizen? Right? That's one thing. Second, US has a population of 300 million. Right? China has 1.4 billion. India has 1.2 billion. And Iran has a lot of population. Indonesia has a lot of population. So what happens in future wars? Does the size of the internet, does the number of users in the internet become a potent force in a cyber warfare? So these are some of the fundamental changes that we need to think through. A lot of the innovation is happening here, right? Everything in the internet is in the English. Maybe 20 years from now, a bulk of people live in China, 1.4 billion. Would a lot of the internet content be start delivering in Chinese? Should we all need to learn Chinese because it's a global platform? So we need to understand how the global changes are happening. We need to understand where the innovations are happening. We need to understand where the job market is going to shift in terms of innovation and whatnot. So that's what we need to keep track of. The only way the United States stays competitive is through innovation. We cannot compete on material costs. We cannot compete on labor costs. So the only way we stay competitive is innovation. And that's something we need to continue to grow and foster even in the area of cybersecurity. So that's our only leverage, and which we have successfully managed to execute over the last decades and decades and decades. But that can change if the youth of today don't embrace this and they don't work as hard. There is no substitute for hard work and innovation. So this is just a plea to all the young people here to continue to do that. So, so let's take a look at the changing actors, right? So what happened is the hackers have really changed. So I'm going to look at how we look at the demographic shifts. Let's look at how the hackers are shifting, what the major adversaries are in the cybersecurity area. The attacker landscape has evolved. When individuals or small groups of people used to attack, to basically large mass attacks for a very sinister purpose, and hacks today controlled by nation states. So the first change that has happened is from people who are individually smart, like Robert Morris and so on and so forth, that has given way to a hacker marketplace. Has anybody gone into a hacker marketplace? The hacker underground marketplace? Is anybody aware of that? Who has been to a hacker underground marketplace? 1, 2, 3. Brian has gone into all of these things. So what happens there? What do you want to buy? You can buy a zero-day exploit. You can buy a botnet service, right? You can rent a hacker. You can rent somebody to basically attack a network. So everything that you need to do today, you can just be a corporate manager, hiring, renting somebody to do it. Excuse me, sorry. And so given this marketplace, the game has changed. So it's not a question of time when an attack will be launched and something is discovered. So a lot of people are spending a lot of time constantly working on inventing new hacks for commercial purposes. So that has broadly changed something. So right, in the end, if the US has a cyber army producing new innovation, and a small country, let's say like Armenia, they need to launch an attack. So they don't need to invest several $1 billion in setting up an army. They can just go rent at a marketplace and launch a quick attack somewhere. So the entry into this field has basically gone down very significantly. You can buy any kind of malware, which can be customized and whatnot. The second thing is the hacktivists. Most people think of hacktivists as basically people who are working on a social cause. When Snowden was arrested, a lot of hacktivists, they basically started launching attacks. But as a nation, as a country, that's still an attack, and we still need to counter that. And there were a lot of targeted attacks on MasterCard, Visa Card, Department of Justice, Church of Scientology, Government of Egypt, and the World Bank, but they are still attacks. We need to address them. Right? The third kind of incident that we are seeing is basically coming from terrorists. So a lot of terrorists are investing very heavily into this. So what are the terrorists trying to do with this? Now, terrorists are trying to attack through a completely different means. They're using the internet as basically a propaganda tool. A lot of the information that they put is not even true. But the whole idea is they're trying to change public opinion based on that. So a lot of fake news that we're talking about in the elections, it really started through terrorist propagandas. During the war between Hezbollah and Israel, right? What happened? Israel won the real war, but Hezbollah won the propaganda war. They used old pictures and whatnot, showing ships being damaged and attacked and whatnot, and they won the propaganda war. And they basically caught Israel off guard. Why are they doing that? They're doing that to gain public sympathy. They're doing that to show how strong they are so that they can gain more followers, more recruits, and more money. Again, this is a huge challenge that needs to be addressed. And then crime syndicates, right? So like I said, there's a marketplace, and there are crime syndicates now basically operating in these marketplaces where basically they're controlling a lot of the new hacks that are being developed and distributed. But lastly, but not the least important, is the insider attacks. The Snowdens, the Bradley Mannings, they have completely changed the paradigm of cyber attacks, right? Anybody can go in. The trouble is, it's very hard to contain them, and it's very hard to repulse these attacks, because you have individual organizations that you need to trust to get the work done. If the same individuals turn rogue, then you have no choice. And we have mentioned this before, but I'll elaborate once more, that each and every country has, and as part of its military doctrine, that cyber has become the next frontier of warfare. After we already have land, air, sea, right? Then space, and then cyber is becoming the next frontier of warfare, and each country is investing very heavily. So which country has the best offensive capability? Take a guess. Huh? How many people think China? You're all wrong. United States. We have the best trained and the best cyber army in the whole world. We just don't go about, launching trivial attacks, but we have the most trained personnel in the United States. So stand pleased with this. The United States has put together a formidable force, all in the Beltway area in the Washington, and we have the strongest army out there. It's a bunch of private contractors, a bunch of government agencies, they're all working together to get that. And every country is doing that. And probably the closest one behind that would be Russia. Now, China was one of the first ones to start large major attacks. But if you look at a lot of the attacks that are coming from China, they're basically old, outdated attacks which are being repurposed over and over again with small modifications. The real innovations in attacks are also coming from the United States. And so if you look at what's happening because of this, right? So every country has a part of the military doctrine. So if you look at what happens in the conventional warfare, right? You have basically military positions, you have troop movements, you have ships, you have missile launchers. Through satellite imagery, we can basically detect a lot of that, and we can basically see if somebody is doing anything. But cyber is totally dark. You have no idea what the enemy capability is. The only way we knew that is through ground intelligence. What does ground intelligence mean? That we have spies sitting in the other country telling us what their capabilities are. And that's not always completely reliable. So what has happened because of that is that every country fears the worst in every other country, and every country is engaged in developing cyber arms as much as they can. So every country has a huge arsenal. Trust is hard to establish in the cyber area because when everybody has a military doctrine which considers this a major cyber front, right? And a lot of countries are relying on proxy organizations in which they have a group of hackers working together, they keep supporting them financially to launch attacks against other countries without directly making them state employees, and that's how they are walking away without claiming any of this. So cybersecurity today is not only a technical problem, it's also a political and diplomatic problem. Whenever a problem reaches the UN, What does that mean? It's an unsolvable problem. Because countries are going to fight over it, and nothing is going to come out of that. So cyber today has reached that proportion when UN is involved, the OSCE is involved. Every international organization has basically a cyber component to this in terms of diplomacy, including the ITU, including IEEE. Every organization today is involved in cyber. And so what's happening today is I'm involved in a lot of diplomatic discussions around cyber, especially between US and Russia relations, through some of the work I've done with the State Department and with the Russians. It's an intractable problem. Because why is it an intractable problem? Remember something which I told you earlier. Because of lack of visibility. You don't know what your adversary is doing. It's very hard to track it down without getting real data. And the countries are blocking from data to being transferred back and forth for the purpose of security analytics and forensics, which means that we are not able to attribute any attacks to anybody. So that's a fundamental challenge that we're facing, which I believe is not going to be solvable anytime soon, despite all the diplomatic wranglings. So what are we doing? How much time do you have? Huh? That's it? Okay, so I'm going to work very fast. So one of the favorite pastime for people is to blame humans for security. Well, it's a human problem, right? People do stupid things, right? People are always trying to, click on links and whatnot. So it's a human problem. So let me ask you all, how many of you think you are all stupid? Well, there are a few here. But I don't believe in a human stupidity. I think it is unfair to blame the humans. The humans have successfully lived in this environment. They have successfully built bridges. They have built beautiful art and whatnot. Humans are not stupid people. It's that technology and humans are not compatible. I think technology needs to change rather than trying to change humans. So we have done everything to change humans, right? We keep training people, right? We keep giving them security policies. How many of you read security policies? You do? Okay. Well, I was going to say something else, but I'll stop. But humans are not changing. The training is failing. Security policies are not working. Why? There's a fundamental disconnect here, and everybody tends to blame the human. Well, it's a human problem. It is not a human problem. It's a problem of technology. It's a problem of diplomacy. It's a problem of crime. It's a problem of police investigation. So it's a problem that we need to solve together. I mean, humans are a part of the mix. You cannot fundamentally change the humans to behave differently than what they're already behaving. So we need to start thinking more creatively. How can we? And I also don't like the solution, well, we'll take the humans out of the loop. We cannot take the humans out of the loop. So the humans have to be in the loop. They have to be making decisions, yet the technology needs to be secure. So the new paradigm of security should be to be secure in an insecure environment. That's where we need to think of novel architectures. That's where we need to think of basically containment. People are intruding, they're coming in, but how do we contain them best, right? I mean, humans also have car accidents, right? And that's also a human problem. And so what do we do? Should we shut all the humans off from driving cars? So in the end, the humans can just stay in their home in a concrete bunker, and then humans will not be a problem. But then we don't have a society, we don't have a life. So we need to address the challenges fundamentally. So I'll give you an example, how corporations are reacting. Right? What happens after Snowden? What happened after Chelsea Manning? The knee-jerk reaction of every company was to lock everything down. Companies like GE, Lockheed Martin, even the federal departments, you cannot use a thumb drive, you cannot do this, we're going to monitor everything. Is that the right solution? We are basically curtailing the freedom of people and what they're going to be able to do in order to be able to protect our information. But in the long run, that's an unproductive, self-defeatist way of doing things. We need to find ways in which people can operate clearly without getting stopped, and we still have our information secure. So we have not reached that point yet. So people are just using whatever they can to just block everything. Right? So, given that I have only 5 minutes left now? All right. So let me talk about what the University of Albany is doing. Right? So the first thing I told you is that, right? our training is not, our education is not hitting the targets. The need for security is one way, the education is in a different way. We are still training security professionals based on antiquated models of security. That needs to change. So what we have done as a university is, we are basically embarked on a large exercise. We have created new programs. We have created programs in digital forensics and security analytics. We have created programs in homeland security and cybersecurity. And we have programs in the computer science. So what we have embarked on is basically an exercise whereby we look at the entire domain of security and figure out where the gaps at the university are. And, and to basically align our security education with the modern concept of security and the way the security is going, including things that talked about like cyber physical systems, making sure there's security analytics, making sure there is policy, making sure there's a human factors in there, so all of that. My comment on innovation and cyber, that innovation is the engine for economic growth and keeps America competitive. So we are building a cyber innovation lab. Why are we building that? Not only for university students to learn, where we have attack and defense networks, where we are actually collecting data to test products, but also to support the industry. So we are opening up our cyber innovation lab to the industry in general, in which they can bring in their products, they can test it against our attack and defense networks, and basically move their products forward. The third, we have basically amassed a $4 million portfolio of different projects. So one of our biggest projects is about is a $2 million project from IARPA, where we are looking at the insider threat problem. The goal there is to basically stop the next Snowden from revealing information. What we are doing there is, instead of just passively monitoring everybody and seeing if somebody has stolen information, we send them active probes to see what their intentions are. So using a combination of psychology, behavior, and technology, we are able to understand the intentions of people before they actually make the decisions for stealing data. So another key challenge I thought was, humans is the problem, right? So what is the solution to that? Punish the humans. Put fear in them. If you don't follow security practices, you will lose money. If you don't do it, you'll be a reprimand. That's not how humans work. They work with incentives. I worked at GE Research Labs for many, many years. The only way the company operated was by giving incentive compensation. Once they announce an incentive compensation, every manager runs in that direction. Every employee runs in that direction. So we have a large project from National Science Foundation to see the role of incentives in security. So if you were to tell everybody, hey, look, we will give you a $1,000 bonus at the end of the year if you follow safe security practices, will that change people's behavior? Instead of punishing them, if you don't do this, you'll get fired. If you don't do this, we're trying the reverse way. That's the second project we have. The third project we have is basically working with community colleges, right? We have so much shortage of talent in the cybersecurity area that there is no way we can meet it with the current rate of education that we have. And one of the key things which I've always felt is there are a lot of brilliant talent in community colleges, students who didn't know what they really wanted to do. They never get a chance, they never succeed. To pick out the students who may be good for cyber and train them into cyber. So for that, we have basically created a new program in which we are creating virtual labs, virtual environments, and providing it to community college students. Our goal there is to inspire them, encourage them to work in the security field. And in the past, what we used to do is we used to bring the two-year community college students into four-year programs and then try to help them there. But they struggle. It's too late because they're already struggling with a new environment, a much more difficult environment. And on top of that, if you add some more training or education to them, it becomes harder for them. So our intervention point is a year before then. Our goal is, if a year before we start working with community college students, provide them through their instructors the same tools and techniques that are being used at the University of Albany, we will have a much better chance of making them successful. So that's our early intervention program in community colleges. The third thing we are doing is we are working with high schools in the area and basically creating cyber camps for them so that they can come in, they can really understand what cyber is rather than what they learn from televisions, which is really not very accurate. So all of that, what we're doing is to create an ecosystem around here whereby we can support the high schools, the community colleges, and students at the university to create world-class security experts. And in our graduating class, a large fraction of our students already have jobs, and a few of them will have jobs before the end of this summer. So we'll have 100% employment coming out of the program. A lot of the students from our program are sitting right here. And that's what our hope is, that we want to create our training and education in UAlbany in such a way that they actually meet the demands of the industry rather than just training them for something and throwing them out. That doesn't work. It doesn't help the industry. It doesn't help the nation. It doesn't help the students. It doesn't help the university. So that's something we're embarking on. And we want to work closely with the companies in the organization. We are working with NISTEC. Todd is here. To figure out what the real needs from the industry are, so that we can tailor our programs to really meet the needs of the industry rather than shooting in the dark, creating some students in hope that they will actually fit into the industry. And so all of this is going on, and how much time do I have? 5? Okay, so I'll do a quick summary. I don't think we will have much time for questions, but I'll do a quick summary. So we've all talked about security, right? But even though I'm talking about security, I'm passionate about security, don't give in to the security hype. Security has been hyped up too much. There are other important fields as well. It is not helping the field, it's actually hurting the field. It's an important field that must go on with all the other things. It's not the end of the world. We'll figure the security problem out. And so if you look at a hype cycle, right? You hype some technology, and there's a trough of disillusionment. I think we're getting very close to that, right? So temper your expectations from cyber, temper your needs for cyber, so that we can go at a steady pace. And a few things which I want you to leave here and remember. One, the security paradigm is fundamentally shifting. It's gone away from the perimeter to the core. It's gone away from blocking to visibility. What we need today is visibility into our networks. And that's the future of security. And technologically, this current decade is about sensors and communication. If you can educate yourself in cyber physical systems, sensors, communication, and security around that, that would be a very profitable growth field going forward. So don't focus on the problems of today, focus on the problems of the future. Okay? And third, realize that the security vulnerabilities are inevitable. We are living in an era of hyper-vulnerability, like Reg said at the other conference. We are creating more vulnerability that we are actually patching up. So people are going to be able to break in. The people are going to be able to launch sinister attacks. What we need to do is to be able to detect, contain, and move forward. Lastly, the insider problem is not going to go away. We need to be able to address insider problems in a creative way, maybe by sacrificing privacy, maybe if that's the only solution. And I want you guys to work hard, innovate, and come up with new security solutions, because the current paradigm has not worked. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, thank you very much for patiently listening. The only thing that strikes me, I'm going to say one remark before I go out of here, is the sheer lack of women in this audience. I can basically count them on two hands, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that's it. We need more women in the cybersecurity field, right? It is no longer a techie field. It is becoming a policy field. It's becoming a data field. It's becoming a field of thinking rather than doing. So we need to encourage more and more women. We cannot take half the population of the world and keep them away from security. We need to encourage more women to join in. Thank you. Any questions? Nick? He works for me. He works for me 24/7. Okay, all right. Thank you all very much. If you have any questions,